Springbok's depth chart for 2024, folks. That's what we're going to have a look at today. It is the end of the international rugby season, which is one of my favourite times of year. Not because there's no international games on, but because we get to look back at the year and see just how each of the coaches from the Six Nations and Rugby Championship sides have managed their squads throughout the 2024 year, by which I mean how much game time have they been giving to different players? Are they coaches who just like consistency, keep the same starting 15, keep the same backups, only change when there are injuries? Or at the other end of the scale, rotation, keep blooding new guys, keep trying new combinations. Is there a right or wrong way to get this done? Not really. Basically, whatever works for whatever coach. But certainly you feel like there is a balance to be had between being overly chopping and changing and then overly reliant on your kind of main starting 15 players. We are going to start with the box, but as I said, we'll be going through likes of Ireland, All Blacks, France, and so on throughout the next few weeks. This is one of my favorite videos to make. Hopefully, if it hasn't earned your subscription just yet, by the end, you'll be with me on that. But we'll start with the box. We'll go through the players they've used, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on if you think this squad is too old, if you think they are building well with the young guys they are blooding. Let's go. Let's start with the front rowers because you feel like that's a pretty big area for the box in terms of an area of strength. Now, if you look at these bars next to me here, you'll see there's green, there's yellow, and there's like grey, black, and blue. The green guys are the ones who have been the main guys used. So they've got that kind of chunk of the game time for the 2024 season. So if you're looking at number one, that's your loose heads. Oxenche is there with just over half the game time. So he has been pretty well used. And you feel like around about half the game time for your leading candidate is a good sizable chunk. You want them to be there and present for the majority of the matches. In Ox's case, it is just over half. Then you got Steenekamp there as the yellow chunk, who's just over a quarter of the game time. And then the rest of the game time at loose head is shared between the likes of Jan Hendrik Wessels, Thomas du Toit, you got Mkunu, and you've even got Koch there for like 6 minutes when I think there was a yellow card and an injury to other loose heads. I think it was the game against England. So apparently he can scrum at loose head as well. So it seems like a pretty nice balance, especially when you keep in mind Stephen Kitsoff didn't even play any international rugby, assuming he's able to come back at test level when he recovers from his recent surgery. That's a kind of another cab off the rank as an option for the box. Hooker has largely been two guys over the last few years. That's Malcolm Marx and Bongi and Bonambi. If you're looking at green, that's Marx. If you're looking at yellow, that's Bongi. So not a heck of a lot of change there in terms of the vast majority of the game time going to those two fellas. There's kind of less than a fifth of the game time to share between the other guys, which is the likes of Grobelaar, who gets just under 15% of the minutes. So he has at least been given a chance in the 2024 year. You've got Andre Hugo Venter there as well, who's got a kind of touch, and then Wessels, who also appeared on the loose head ranks. He's a pretty special character who can play hooker and loose head, but he is there with a few minutes in the 2024 season as well. But largely, you're still looking at Bongi and you're looking at Malcolm. If either of those guys go down, it is a little bit concerning, but we literally saw the Box win a World Cup final with neither of those guys. Marx wasn't even available and Bongi got injured really early. So Dion Ferry stepped up to the plate in that one. It has been done. Tight head, Vincent Koch, he is there. Not quite 40% of the game time, so he's the kind of least of those three guys in terms of how much the starting guy has got. Then you've got Franz Malherbe there as well. Remember, he spent a bit of time on the sidelines. His yellow numbers would likely be more increased if he'd had a less disrupted season. Thomas du Toit there in grey, and then Wilco Low, who actually managed to get a bit of game time towards the end of the year in black. Trevor Nyakane did make an ever so brief appearance this year, but sadly we didn't get to see that much in the game time from him. So, I mean, overall, all these campaigners that we see in the front row for the box are all pretty experienced campaigners. It's good to see the likes of Steenekamp and Grobelaar and Co. actually get a bit of game time. And, front rowers, all these guys largely are kind of in their late 20s, early 30s, but in terms of front rowers, they're able to play pretty long into the careers. So I wouldn't say there's any immediate kind of red flags there. For locks, boy, Eben Etzebeth has played a lot of the time with that number 4 jersey for the Box. It's either been in the 4 jersey or off the bench. He's had a few games off the bench this year, but almost 70% of the game time at tight head lock has been Big Eben. And then the loose head lock, you've got it largely divided between these two guys together. That's Rowan Nokia in green and Franco Mostert in yellow. Both of these guys have had injuries at different kind of parts of the season. But yeah, between those three guys at loose head and tight head lock, that's essentially the lion's share of the minutes. And then there's a few guys who can flirt between both positions, like Achias Neyman is there as the second guy at tight head lock and the third guy at loose head lock, so he's able to play either side. Likewise, Salman Murat, he's there in grey for number 4 and black for number 5. So he's had a decent amount of game time this year. I wouldn't say a lot, but he's had certainly a decent chunk. And then that man, World Player of the Year, Pieter-Steph du Toit, can do a bit of everything. He's there as your top guy on 4 and column 5. So between that and the blindside flank, Pieter-Steph has genuinely done a bit of everything. There has been a bit of talk that Eben has been slowing down. He is 33 years old, but you can see from that he's played a lot of game time this year. So their Box had a lot of injuries in the second rowers this year. You feel like they would have managed the time a little bit more evenly, if not for the fact that sometimes they just didn't have bodies available. We'll see how things go in 2025. For the loosies, it's kind of the usual candidates. It's Khaleesi there at 6, Pieter-Steph there at 7, and Visa there at 8 as you kind of top 3 guys. Backups wise, Van Staden's been back up to Khaleesi, Dixon has been back up to Pieter-Steph, and then Kwagga Smith has been back up to Visa. All of those guys, I think between them, have had pretty well managed game time. It's been good to see the likes of Ben Jason Dixon get some game time. He's been a bit overshadowed by the fact that the guy he's standing in for is World Player of the Year. Van Staden, with about a quarter of the game time on the open side, I think has been given a decent shot. And then Kwagga Smith, who is the backup kind of number 8, according to these numbers. He's also the third choice open side flanker. So when you kind of add his minutes together, Kwagga is actually getting a fair bit of that kind of super sub game time. And then likewise, Elric Lowe. If you're looking at the grey on number 7 and number 8, he's had also a decent bit of chunk of game time. A few guys who've had a bit more token minutes is like Evan Roos at number 8. You've also had Cameron Hanekom. You've also had Ron Fenter there. These guys are all kind of flirting with pretty marginal minutes up the top. Also, Pepsi Buthelezi as well got one game up against Portugal. He's there black in the number 6 jersey. But yeah, the kind of usual candidates, with Ben Jason Dixon maybe being kind of one of the biggest newcomers to actually get a full chunk, like almost a quarter of the season in that number 7 jersey. Backs wise, 9 and 10 are, I feel like, more mixed than most sides. Like, you've seen a lot of sides stick with kind of 1 or 2 guys. Not so much the Box in 2024. Like, look at number 9. Green, Grant Williams. Yellow, Corbus Reinach. Grey, Jaden Hendrickse. Black, Faf de Klerk, obviously had an injury-disrupted season, probably would have had more game time if not for his injury. And then Morne van der Berg also got a bit of time there in blue. So there's not one guy who gets even a third of the game time. It is genuinely quite evenly divided. And then number 10, Pollard, Feinberg and Ngomazulu, Libok, and then Jordan Hendrickse as well. Like when the bottom guy, being Jordan Hendrickse, has like around about 15% of the game time, I feel like that's more than most 4th choice guys have gotten. So it's also an interesting mix. Probably Sasha there in yellow gets more game time, if not for that injury that he got kind of towards the tail end of the Rugby Championship. Midfield is one area, interestingly, where it's not so mixed up. Like the 9 and 10 is a proper mix of guys. The midfield is stable. And maybe you could say it's getting on in terms of the age-wise. Number 12, Dear Lende, 60%, close enough to the game time. Interestingly, is your top choice second 12, followed by Esterhazen, who would have had more minutes, but obviously had to remove all the minutes that he got red carded for against Portugal. He missed the vast majority of the game, so none of those minutes count because he wasn't on the field. And then Andre Pollard filled in at 12 a few times in a pinch. And then 13, Jesse Creel. Jesse Creel with close to 80% of the game time in the number 13 jersey. More game time than any other Bok player in 2024 in their position of choice. And then he's also got some game time on the right wing as well. So Jesse Creel has been ever present in 2024. Lekanyo Arm behind him. And then Dialende has also filled in a pinch at times. But yeah, Jesse Creel, really ever present. The wings is also a kind of handful of guys. The left wing is a lot more stable. Kurtley Arendse, half the game time. Mapimpi, almost 40% of the game time. And then Colby has been on the left wing a little bit. He largely appears on the right, but a little bit on the left. Speaking of the right wing, Colby's there with 60%. So if you include his game time on the left wing as well, he's not that far behind Jesse Creel in terms of his total minutes. So right wing Colby, mostly him. A bit of Kurtley Arendse, so those guys have switched between the two. Remember, Russie's kind of said in press conference he doesn't really care. He lets them sort out who wants to play which side. Kane and Moody's had a bit of game time. Edville van der Merwe's had a bit of game time. And then, as I mentioned, Jesse Creel kind of up there in blue. And then fullback, it's interesting to see that we've had one of the veterans kind of been surpassed by one of the kind of younger guys. So Fassi is there, 60% of the game time in green. LaRue was there with about a third. And then, remember, Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu had to play for the vast majority of a game. I think it was the second game against Ireland when Villy went off pretty early. So he's got a bit of game time there in grey. And then Q and Horn, a bit of token game time there in black. So that is position by position the box in terms of who's gotten what game time. As I mentioned, the kind of standout guys in the forwards, you're looking at Eben in terms of his position, absolutely dominates the game time. Jesse Creel in his position. And then you got some versatile guys. You got the likes of Peter Steff, who not only dominates his position, but pops up in the locks. And the wingers, Arendse and Colby, who can legit kind of swap either wing. It doesn't really seem to matter to them which side of the field they are on. So looking at this box squad overall, there's a lot of familiar names in terms of a couple of World Cups now. So that does mean the squad is on the older side, despite the younger guys being blooded. Of all the kind of tier 1 sides that we're looking at, they are the oldest on average throughout the course of the season at just under 30 years old. The Irish are kind of closer to 28. The All Blacks are closer to 27. Some of the other sides, like the Italians, are closer to 25. So they are marginally older. And when you break it down by position, the likes of, Vincent Koch has been the most used tight head. If we're looking at the most selected 15, the front row would be Nchi, Marks and Koch. Koch's the oldest at 34, and he would be the oldest starting Springbok in that squad, but 34-year-old for a prop is kind of different from a 34-year-old winger. Eben and Nokia would be the second row, and Kolisi, Peter Steff, and Visa would be the back row. So Visa, Nokia, and Ox would be the only 20-year-olds in the starting Bok pack this year if we're looking at their kind of most selected team by game minutes. All the other guys are at least 30. Ox and Visa are 29. Williams and Pollard would be the 9-10 combo. Pollard's hit 30 and Williams is like 28, so a little bit younger than the forwards. Dialende and Creel would be a pretty senior midfield at 33 and 30, and then outside backs would be Arendse on the left, Colby on the right, and Fassi at fullback. Colby would be the oldest of those three at 31. But the Bok wingers don't seem to slow down. It's an interesting one. And I've talked about before, the All Blacks wingers tend to kind of lose their spot by like 27, 28, whereas the Bok wingers like Mapimpi is still going strong, even if he's not kind of the most selected left winger. Boks did use 50 players this year, which is more than many squads. That have put them fourth in terms of the Tier 1 squads players used. You got to remember that Scotland and France basically sent squads to the Americas, which were full of either debutants or really low-cap players. They essentially sent second-string sides in the July tests, so they blooded a lot more players than anybody else. And the Welsh, with a bit of a tumultuous season, have also been forced to blood a number of new players. So they actually used more players than the Boks. The Boks, some of the guys they blooded didn't get a lot of game time. The likes of Q and Horn, Cameron Hanekom, Mkunu, Buthelezi, Fenta. That's Ruan Fenta. Didn't get a heck of a lot of game time. But you feel like that game time with the Boks squad is still useful. It gives a chance for the coaches to have a look at the players and those players to kind of learn from the more senior guys around them. So that's the Boks squad for 2024. It's not messy, is one thing I would say. There's a decent amount of rotation, and you feel like in 2025, some of the guys who I mentioned who were on very low minutes will see those numbers increase. And some of the senior guys, like with what's happened to LaRue and Fussy, may see their roles switch from, the backup guy kind of becomes the starter and the starter becomes the backup. But we will have to see. You guys let us know your thoughts on the box squad. As I said, if you found any of this interesting, feel free to subscribe to the channel. There'll be more videos out for the Irish and New Zealand and French and English and so on in terms of their squad, so we can compare how the coaches are getting it done. It always makes it more interesting to put it kind of into context to compare one coach to another. But yes, hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly enjoy making it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.